Hello, my name is Jacqueline London, and today my presentation is about eating sustainably and moving toward a more plant-based diet. In this presentation, we'll go over different literature about why it's important to eat sustainably and why it's important to implement sustainable practices as it relates to our diet. First, what is sustainability? Sustainability, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is the avoidance of the depletion of natural resources in order to maintain ecological balance. Sustainable eating, according to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, is about choosing foods that are helpful to the environment and to our bodies. So why does sustainability matter? Unity Environmental University states that sustainability allows humans and animals to continue to have resources that enhance our quality of life, such as clean air, fresh water, and fruitful lands. So we're going to get into the literature now. The first article we're going to review is titled, "The Environmental Impacts of Plant-Based Diets. How does organic food consumption contribute to environmental sustainability?" This was written by Lancourt et al. The aim of this study was to estimate diet-related environmental effects according to a pro-vegetarian score, as well as effects of organic food consumption based on level of plant consumption. The population of the study was 34,442 volunteer participants from a prospective Nutrinet Santé cohort. The methods for data collection here, one was through a questionnaire. This questionnaire asks various questions, including questions about physical activity, alcohol consumption, food frequency, organic food frequency, and portion sizes. To collect data about environmental impact and how each food item affected the environment, the French diagnostic tool Dialect and Anacove was utilized. The results of this literature show that there was a significant decrease in greenhouse gas emissions, cumulative energy demands, and land occupation in those who ate a more plant-based diet. It was found that animal products were responsible for 80% of dietary greenhouse gas emissions for diets rich in animal products. Red meat required more energy demand and land use compared to fish, produce, or snack foods. There was not a significant difference in the vegetarian diet versus the organic vegetarian diet when it came to its effects on the environment. So what does this mean? In short, transitioning to a more plant-based diet can help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and land occupation. This can reduce the risk of climate change, it can help preserve natural ecosystems, and it can improve our water quality. The second article that we reviewed is Sustainable Diets for the Future. Can we contribute to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by eating a healthy diet? This was written by McDiarmid et al. The aim of this article was to test how different diets compared regarding greenhouse gas emissions. Included here were diets created to meet nutrition requirements for the average woman in the United Kingdom. There was a diet created for the upper limits, the lower limits, and for her exact requirements. The methods to collect data for this study included using the National Diet and Nutrition Survey Data Bank to determine nutrient data, as well as determining greenhouse gas emissions by using life cycle analysis. These life cycle analyses evaluate the carbon footprint left by food production. The results of the study show that there was a 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions for the diet that focused on low greenhouse gas emission foods and not adaptability. The meal that was created that met the nutritional needs and had reasonable constraints and paid attention to the patterns in which people do commonly eat found that there was a 36% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. Reduction in the amount of meat consumed significantly decreased greenhouse gas emissions and this study does not call for complete elimination of meat from the diet. So what does this mean? Reducing the amount of meat consumed can help to significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The study does not call for one to stop eating meat or to stop consuming meat in their diet. Animal products also leads to higher greenhouse gas emissions than plants, vegetables, fruits, legumes, but a reduction in those things and not elimination can still make a significant difference that we can see that it will benefit our move towards a more sustainable diet. The third article that we reviewed is titled Health and Environmental Impacts of Plant-Rich Dietary Patterns, a U.S. Prospective Cohort Study. This was written by Musica et al. And the aim of the study was to evaluate health and environmental impact of various plant-rich diets. The inclusion for the study was a U.S. cohort study from the Nurses Health Study 2. Included in this study was 65,625 participants. The methods of data collection was through a questionnaire that was updated every 2 years. This study did last from 2008 to 2017. The questionnaire asked about food intake as well as portion sizes. And in this study, environmental impact was determined by previously set values for each item based on life cycle assessment studies. The results of the study found that food groups that contributed the most to greenhouse gases included red meat, processed meats, and animal-based food items. Plant-based did not necessarily mean healthy, and non-healthy plant-based diets reduced greenhouse gas emissions and land use, but it increased the risk of negative health conditions. So what does this mean? A decrease in red meat and animal products decreased greenhouse gas emission. It decreased the carbon footprint, and it gets us closer to a more sustainable diet. Not eating meat does not equate to a healthful diet. This article did hit on the fact that one can be following a plant-based and or vegan diet and still not have a healthy diet, because highly processed foods are also oftentimes considered vegan foods because they don't include animal products, but they can be high in saturated fats or high in sugars. The fourth article we'll review is Plant-Based Dietary Patterns for Human and Planetary Health by Gibbs and Cappuccino. This was a review of literature, and the aim of this review was to summarize the planetary and health benefits associated with a plant-based diet. The methods to collect data for this study was to include research that covered topics such as plant-based diets, planetary health, human health, sustainability, and chronic disease prevention. The results of this study show that plant-based foods leave a less significant carbon footprint than animal-based foods, as we've been seeing to be the case in our previous studies. Also, 52% of greenhouse gas emissions caused by food was caused by cattle production alone. So we know that red meat tends to be having a higher effect on greenhouse gas emissions, but specifically cattle is causing more than 50% of the greenhouse gases by food as a whole. The exclusion of animal products from the diet could lead to 49% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions. Although this would be a significant decrease, it is important to understand that we may never reach the point where there is a complete exclusion of animal products from the human diet. This study also showed that Americans could save 24 to 35% of dietary and total land use by removing meat from their diet. As previously stated, we may not get to the point that we completely remove meat from our diet, but it does show that there can be some reduction if we do make changes. It also mentioned that it takes 43 liters of water to produce 1 kilogram of beef, and only 1,000 liters of water produce 1 kilogram of grain. This gives a good idea of the greater demand of resources that livestock requires, but it's also important to remember that beef and grain play a different role in our diets, and that in future studies it may be more fitting to compare the resources needed for 1 kilogram of beef to the resources needed to match the protein of 1 kilogram of beef with plant products. This study also showed that reduced meat consumption equaled reduced blue water use by 21%. And blue water is fresh water, so reducing our meat consumption will increase the amount of fresh water that we have available for other tasks and goals that we have. In short, decreased consumption of beef can significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions and land use. After looking at the research, 4 conclusions made here is that meat and animal products leave the largest carbon footprint regarding the human diet. Red meat leaves the largest footprint of all forms of meat. Plant-based does not mean elimination of animal products, and plant-based improves the environment and human health. What can we do with this information? First call to action is to encourage progressively moving toward a more plant-based diet. This can start with suggesting that patients include meatless meals within their day, or it can start with suggesting that they just consume smaller portions of meat. Because seafood is very popular in southern Louisiana, it can also start with maybe not limiting their seafood, but limiting the amount of red meat they consume, or limiting the amount of burgers and hot dogs they may consume. So to progressively make a movement toward plant-based would be a great place to start. My second call to action is to paint the full picture for our patients and our clients. It's easy to say that someone should eat more fruits or vegetables or less meat, but when you haven't done that or you don't do that, it's really hard to incorporate into your diet or to stick to it over time. And so when we're making these suggestions, it's important that we're also giving our patients recipes to follow. Also with those recipes to give pictures that make sure that are in color. Oftentimes during internship, I know we've given in black and white papers, but to give a paper in color, a meal in color, it helps to show how appealing or appetizing that meal can look, which would have a patient or a client feel more willing to try it. It's also important to keep things close to the cultural norms. And so you can give meals that are similar to what's traditionally eaten, but have it be an all plant-based diet instead, or a diet that involves seafood instead of red meat. If possible, also including links or QR codes to videos that demonstrate how to prepare meals, how to store meals, ingredients that'll be needed, and what the meal will look like at the end can also be helpful in encouraging patients to try more vegan options and or more plant-based meal options. With that being said, we have made it to the end of this presentation, with my last 2 calls of actions to be encouraging a more plant-based diet that would also help in environmental sustainability, as well as giving patients and clients all the resources they would need to implement a more plant-based diet into their everyday routine. Here are all my references. I do have a reference for all the pictures and all the articles that were used within this PowerPoint.